Good morning, everyone. It gives me great pleasure today to welcome Tapasya Samal for her proposition today, which is titled Archiving Architecture, Perpetuating Built Heritage in the Digital Landscape. Tapasya Samal is an architect and has an MSc in Conservation of Historical Buildings from the University of Bath. And her passion is the research and documentation of built heritage, adaptive reuse, traditional building practices, efficient information design, photography, site management. And she has done several projects, in her private capacity in the Indian states of Punjab, Rajasthan, Bihar, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Jharkhand. So pretty much all the northern and western states. And her recent projects involve the Viceregal Lodge, the Old Moti Bagh Palace, 13th Finance Commission projects in Punjab, and the development of Shaheed Bhagat Singh Museum. Now, Tapasya is currently an associate professor at the Sushant School of Design. I have to say that she used to be with the School of Architecture before she left us, and is also actively involved with INTAC as the co-convener of the Gurgaon chapter. A very warm welcome, Tapasya. All yours.
Thank you very much for the extended introduction. Of course, I am not a traitor. I did leave architecture, but architecture, has not left me. It's like that old saying. So I am going to now today talk about something that I think is my years old itch. Is what I take up as a hobby. I have been engaging with it at different levels, and probably it's a question that has been on my mind forever. And these are the images I'm using and the kind of collaborations I've had. I mean, all of them are available with me later for reference if anybody. I couldn't put all of them there, but yes, the images I'm using mostly are mine, or else are credited to known sources, or my associates, or the collaborators I've worked with. Some of these images are also taken by students or are works of students, so they've been appropriately, I hope, given credit here. So I'm going to start running through it. What I want to start off with is that this is not something that is a concrete proposal. I'm thinking of this like a development, and maybe I'm just going to run through each of the phases or as the questions arrived on my desk or in my mind. So I started thinking about as in my capacity as a conservation architect and engaging with buildings, people, reading things, being affected by them, being invited to talk about them, or listening to a lot of interesting ideas being thrown at me by both people who belong to the profession and people who either live or take care of old buildings and structures. And so there were many things that constantly were on my radar, including this whole idea of change, and now probably this is an older idea, and pandemic change, and the change which is impacted by human behavior is going to take over more than the change by climate. I don't know if we can quantify that, but yes, I was worried about how little we were able to do about the change that was happening because of climate, or if we could know about places the way we do today in years to come. It started pointing me towards, if we really know about places how they were earlier, and how much do we know about them, and who knows what about them. So these questions started to surface. I was also moved by a lot of actions, like how Badshahpur Baoli's case was taken up by Sushant School of Art and Architecture, and many other organizations and voluntary organizations who did not gain anything from the entire action, but were deeply concerned because it was in their vicinity, and how people came together to maybe sort of start a movement, and it does have impact. Maybe we can sometimes negate it by saying, okay, so the impact is regional, the impact is not national, but there is some impact. And on the other hand, we heard and read about all these buildings that already have been lost or in the process of being demolished, and how much was being spoken about it, or how much we were engaging with it, but where did it lead and how would it lead to where it was. And I also was constantly following this list of modern heritage, which was proposed by INTAC to be taken up as modern heritage buildings of Delhi. And slowly, I cannot say it with pride, but slowly we started crossing out names on it. So, and we're still lining up things to demolish. A brief engagement with this exhibition about Jhabala's work, and we were welcomed into the personal archives, and I came across these drawings and very interesting notations on those drawings, and it kind of and when we took students to document it with us, and how the comment of the students was that if they could see all of this, it would make a difference to how they value what they see. They were actually looking at the physical remains of the building. Maybe they were referring to what they saw, and they were referring to those drawings and those sketches and those watercolors, and thinking about how charming, how different. Can it tell us what the change is? And similarly, when we go through Ram Rahman's documentation of Habib Rahman's work, and we come across so many instances where we can probably say that we can lay out the land for how things would have been, or how they could restore, reproduce, take care of, or continue to engage with. With my academic, assignments, I kept looking at this again and again. And recently, we had a very long discussion about it. How the research method landscape diagram should pan out for us. And I started putting all my thoughts in categories, and I started thinking about, really, do I have something to start off with? Do I have even a topic of inquiry which is remotely relevant? Is only relevant for me? Is it relevant for anybody else? Is there going to be an audience? And who would be the audience, and why would they evaluate? What would be my impact? And I definitely dug into the 4 hard drives I had of all the information, and started pulling out facts and ideas and things that I had left behind while I was working on something, or things I had stumbled upon and never went back to while I was, later on engaged with other things, and how they would be today. So that's where I also started questioning, okay, why are we so moved by demolition? Why are we so moved by discontinuation or discontinuity? It is not new. It has happened in the past, and what Delhi scenario was, at the moment, which I think is this New Delhi quest, where we are trying to redefine certain things, or we are trying to create new stamps. We're trying to create history. So there is. I would not like to be on either side and think whether it is so clear as black and white. It's neither good or bad, or is it gray enough for us? Is it okay to be a darker shade of gray or a lighter shade of gray there when we talk about it, and how probably people have reacted in the past, and what has it done? Has it at all done anything? So I looked back, and I was still thinking about Moses and how we have replacement for each of these sections in society, and in probably how generally public reacts to these kind of things. I was also reading up about, really, are we overreacting? Is it changing? Is it going to change, or is it going to be better? Is it going to? Do we really need to change? Is something that probably is a different question for. Differently answered for all of us. But there are certain things which which pan out slowly and sometimes come without warning, sometimes build up with enough so that you can actually stop it and you can actually see it, spot it, document the thing before it is demolished in time, etc., etc. Well, like a couple of actions which can be taken. But sometimes it is the series of projects which definitely change. The file name changes, but the idea is constant, and the idea is of that change which is desired or is seen as desirable. It could be obviously put in the bracket of development. It could be reasoned with betterment. It could be also under the age-old notion of the Hindi word Jeernodhar, which is, you're going to make it better. You're going to give it a new life, and whether the structure requires new life or not, again, who decides how we decide, and what informs that decision is what I was probably more concerned about, because there are many things that we cannot control, but there are certain things which we can at least influence or create a circumstance for. So I started looking at these notifications which talk about major public buildings to be renovated, including likes of Ravindra Bhavan and Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Library. Of course, I'm just showing the picture of the library, but the museum is also under review for upgradation since I think quite some time now. 2017 was a tender floated. So then I started looking at really, are there constants? Is what we see in the documentation available and what we see on ground, are they constant? Well, nothing is constant is what we've been made to believe, and I agree. But what could be done about it is something that I was looking for an answer for, and I started looking at certain buildings where. Like this image, where there is an intention and then there is another changed intention of continuity. There is nothing wrong with the intention, but probably is a lack of information, or rather the easy availability of that information that could have changed the way this adaptation or this repair or this continuity has panned out. So I was increasingly convinced with this idea, and I was beginning to also pull up reason for demolition, or rather, how do you justify demolition? If I were to, because as a person close to the subject, I should not develop the bias of looking at it only from my perspective. So, of course, all the conversations with my friends who are pursuing PhD gives me this luxury of the word bias, and I'm going to throw that as the reason. But I started to look at reasons why demolition was required, and I was also trying to play the part where I would say, yes, it is. I am pro demolition. Let's look at what we do as to increase the property value. Sometimes it was said that the building is extremely old, and that was seen as a reason to bring it down so that it can be replaced with something which is a lot of things. It's functionally better. It is structurally more stable. It has got the new age services working for it, and the building, if the existing building is adapted, it is always argued in these decision making presentations that if the building is now adapted, for example, for a new VRV system or a centralized air conditioning system, which it was not designed originally for, then you're going to lose all the authenticity, and you're going to lose all the patina, or rather the fabric, and it's not going to be the same. It is going to change beyond recognition. So the overall value of the building is going to come down. So why would you adapt something, and why do we need to adapt it? Sometimes it's also argued that the building is not old enough. It's again, I don't know. It's a contradiction of the previous statement, but it's not heritage enough to save. This is again something that we debate so much about, but I don't know how much we are able to convince anybody, or do we really need to accept it? I'm not sure about that, and I'm still looking for an answer. Sometimes the buildings are termed as hazardous and dangerous, but when you investigate, the condition of the building has been brought to that level where it becomes hazardous or dangerous. Well, whether it is deliberately or not is a CBI investigation, which I'm not capable of. But there are no regulations as such that we have for putting a check on that, which is something I learned during my education at Indian, that there are universally there are rules and regulations which prevent a owner from deliberate neglect, so that the building would fall down and the person could replace it with something swankier, better, and or something that fulfills their demands. I'm not sure about the last point, but this has also come across as in my conversations with people. When why should it be pulled down? It's really ugly. It's looking very bad. So it doesn't go with the image of the city. It is standing out like a sole thing in the middle of nowhere. It's got so many great looking urban architecture and design elements all around it, etc., etc. So I'm still not sure about just those being the reasons. But when you replace something and or you adapt something, so I mean I went to the next question. Okay, fine, you have demolished. What are you going to replace it with? And how is it going to justify the value of that location itself, or is it meant to justify what it is replacing, or what are you adapting? Is there any continuity that you must keep in mind? Or I mean, is it okay to move on and move on to a new paradigm? So this is an image of the Baba Khadak Singh Marg Emporium complex, which really did shape me when I did visit it after the Commonwealth Games upgradation and change. And I'm just still looking for that cause effect or impact. And this is the building that has been proposed again. All good interest, but I'm not sure if that's the best way forward, and I'm still trying to know. And when I started putting down things which were becoming a little more clear to me, but I was still questioning whether there is going to be any takers for this idea. There are going to be any number of people who would even find time to argue about it, if not listen to it or appreciate it. But would it make any difference to anybody is what I started off as a question with. And I also started to zero down on what really am I so concerned about, or what would I like to work with. Because when with my experience of working with different kinds of buildings, whether they were from different timelines, they were of different value, they were also belonging to different owners, or type of stakeholders, it isn't really fair to start off with everything. So I wanted to really narrow down to what I could work with, and constant conversations with, of course, some of the colleagues, and we were going through discussions about how this idea can actually be shaped. So this is again like my beginning about a year ago, and then I started looking deeper, and this is an opportunity that I chanced upon. I sent a paper to this Portugal conference, which was called by the archivists, and it was for an archival subject. And I sent buildings as archives, or archiving buildings as a question, and that's the time when I started looking into documentation and focusing more on really why document, what are we documenting, and what are the issues we are facing. And the bigger question that I started thinking about is like, since buildings are so dynamic, and they are also changing constantly, and our expectations from those buildings are changing constantly. So I was skeptical whether freezing in time is going to be another roadblock for many of us. And is it fair to think about freezing in time? Archiving, inevitably, when I came to the definition of archiving or archival records and archives, and I said things which will bother us would be probably it's permanent in nature. It is meant to be available throughout for checking, for enjoying, for writing about, for investigating further. And I realized that probably the buildings themselves are a separate kind of archival material compared to the content or the all the other documentation which surrounds this building, whether it is the BIM models of how they are today, and with all the fourth dimension information of what will be changing, which windows will probably fall out in how much time, or which gargoyles or which downpipes are going to be cleaned when, and before the rains. So from there to when was it envisaged, when was it drawn up, and those are like something that we can still think as constant, but the dynamic artifact or the constantly changing building, is it actually material worth archiving, is when I arrived at that question of really the freezing in time and knowing about it. What is the knowledge that is to be known, and how does change impact the building as well as people who are looking at it? So I also dug, now again, I diverged from there and started looking at the existing material that we refer to whenever we start thinking about a building, or rather start investigating a building. There is a number of resources that we dig into, and I started to investigate each of those resources to make sure whether we were getting everything that we needed when we really wanted to know about a structure or a building or about built heritage. So started off with the physical documentation where it is available. So the first stop, of course, is looking at all the existing physical archives, including Intact, which has a series of these documents which they have prepared over a very lengthy amount of time when they were engaging with heritage. And the listings, when it's very interesting that when you look at the listings, if it was done in the 80s and then it was revised in the 2000, say 5, 10, you can actually figure out the change. And there are buildings and things and spaces or landscape which drop out of the list because of obviously their loss to time, and that can lead to a very good mapping of any area for which the listing has already been carried out. There are a couple of issues with how we access the information here, and it's got to do with it brought me to the idea of copyright and how content is copyrighted and how information is copyrighted, and how that might be a challenge if one were to think of a project where this information could be readily available. So that's where it led. I looked at National Archives, the kind of content they have, the amount of digitization. Again, in case of Intact, it's not online, the content is not available online, but yes, it is readily available. If you happen to visit it, and with an appointment, you can actually get even certain material copied. Whereas when you go to National Archives, they have come up with digitizing, and there is a lot of information which is already available. All you need to do is sign up and get into the portal and give a reason why you're there, because it identifies you as your origin of interest in the particular copy. And if you happen to visit, and again that's by appointment, the information that you seek has to be given as a written permission letter, which takes a few days to process, and then they locate the information and give it to you on a CD, DVD, or a pen drive, depending on how you get it. But you have to physically go and get it, so it would be a couple of trips to the place to get the information, and especially if you're looking for something which is absolutely rare or is not so well documented in other places. That is at central level, but I've also interacted with some state level archives where I found that the information is again public records, but they are again a treasure trove of all the information which helps you build or rebuild the idea of a city. And this is a map of Patiala which was documented just before the the then PWD implemented a set of change to again upgrade the area, added the civil lines areas, and built the Taradari Park and the roundabout, and redid a lot of things. So it was a chance finding, and there is also a lot of information where they don't have sufficient means to digitize them, sufficient means to decentralize them, or to conserve them from time to time. So maybe one needs to take a pick on all of these, and there is again an idea of putting all of this together as a national register under NNMA's. Activity which has been on for a couple of years now, but it is difficult to provide access is what I think has happened. There is also limitation of resources, both of people and how this cataloging will happen, and how all of this information will come together. It is sometimes a matter of also sensitivity of the data which is available in the age of the record themselves, which make it very tough for you to entrust it for digitization very easily. I started also looking at all the kind of digital archives that one can access, including British Library Online. They have a huge collection of all the their treasure trove of information which they must have collected over years from different places, and they happily share it with you. There is no price to it, and very high resolution images are available as long as you provide credit. There is the fact of limitation, of course, that this data is limited. They don't have everything about every place, and it has to be a significant monument or precinct or area that you're talking about to find information. Very, very, very rare and unknown or unprotected heritage often is not found on their list as well. But there are other private organizations, or rather privately funded and run organizations. There is Digital South Asia Library, which AIIS is also digging into. AIIS themselves have, American Institute of Indian Studies also has their own archives, which a lot of it is now available online, and they themselves take up a series of documentation projects which they put online. Again, these are all scattered, and the information is available in different formats. It's for someone who really needs to find out something, it is all right. But if you think that people who are going to make decisions, or people who are going to really paint their front door, for example, are not mandated by the government to take a permission to paint their front door, unlike how probably say Nizamuddin residents need a permission because they are next to Humayun's tomb from the competent authority under ASI to make a minor change, and even to repaint their own homes. And there's a petition to be filed, and then there's a hearing, and then there is a decision. So there is very fine line about this being too much or too little as well. Like how it is presented, like Art Store is all about the artwork and maybe older prints, and they also record a lot of contemporary work, and all of that is presented to you in a very interesting format, but it's not really always down to the last detail, whereas in the sense that you might want to, for example, track the hands that the artwork might have changed, and so there is a lineage you're drawing from and you're making that a part of your story to build the value. Whereas in the South Asia Library, the information is very, it's very cut and dry. It is not as interesting, and it takes I think fine-tooth comb to find the exact information that you're looking for. So I again started questioning, really, do we need this information? Who needs it? I mean, I'm looking for it. Okay, but if nobody else is looking for it actively, why would this information matter to anybody? Why would we talk about even creating this information or sharing this information? So I was questioning the value of this topic, the value of this idea, or even if I should pursue even thinking about taking it forward, because it just seemed insane. There was so much information and there was still lack of it, and there's so much to do in this direction. Then I started thinking about the limited access to heritage. Does it have any impact in our thinking, in the way we even deal with everyday things? How rituals adapt quickly, and how the contemporary rituals impact buildings. And there are certain examples. Maybe I can show you some images. But so these are the images from the private collections of Jagwala, and these are his office collections, and from his office days, and they have a value, because they really tell us if we should be looking at the constant, like the structure that we have right now on ground, and what should we looking for, what are the clues to change, and why the story would have built the way it is today. Then the quantity and quality of historic fabric, and how would we so prioritize probably our decisions, even if we are not taking any adverse decisions. We are channelizing money to prevent something from collapsing, prevent something from going up in flames sometimes. So informed decisions, again, what is the information which is required, and how much is going to be just sufficient, neither to less nor to more. Inclusive decision making, again, letting people who are already empowered with this information become a part of this conversation, because that can't happen unless they have the time, they take the time to come to a meeting, and they are also allowed to become a part of a meeting, unless it's completely like a stakeholders meeting, which is left to the discretion of whoever's taking that decision to invite people. And why not like just consumption of heritage for pleasure? And I mean, why can't we make peace with some people might just enjoy going through history or going through things of heritage. I started also looking at existing systems that have documentation, and and the idea of looking at these were I'm looking at formats, I'm looking at how much information is relevant, or when does it tip the balance of being too intellectually inclined, too coffee table, too populist. So trying to find that balance, and I'm still my pointer is right about everywhere. So I looked at UNESCO's website, the first idea that comes to me. So okay, World Heritage. It's a jointly owned property by all of us across the world. So how do we evaluate, and what do we look for in it? And I found that it was very tedious, very detailed. Of course, everything is available. So if you're looking for something, the search criteria is again, you really need a little training and a little bit of, I would say, orientation to be able to sift out what you are looking for, or really what would be of value to a certain person. But that is, again, a problem, because most people are looking at this for different reasons. I mean, of course, even if you're a very, very ardent tourist and you're looking at really the value of a city, or if you go to a World Heritage city, like looking at all the things before you chalk out your route, and you do not depend on TripAdvisor or Lonely Planet for your ideas. I was also beginning to look at what kind of information, if I were to even think of information together, and where would this information come from? Is anyone actually bothered about documenting this information? Yes, a lot of people are bothered. This is, again, a project which I fondly remember doing with colleagues and students, and we were looking at listing Rakhi Gadi, and that was a project which was commissioned out of entire Haryana, and we then went on to do a studio project with it, and we were creating these three-dimensional models of existing structures which were taken up for proposal of adaptive reuse by students. These are valuable. These might really help certain people understand the typology of the kind of havelis, or rather homes and home shop models which exist around here. So maybe there are universities are constantly working with information creation, and they are also trying to bring value to their studios by engaging with their cities, or engaging with built heritage as such. And of course, my time at SSA proved that we did it there all the time. And I've also been to exhibitions by SPA and CEPT. And I really think that is the data which is probably important for many decision-making process. But then again, everything is not covered, everything is not available all the time. Data gets lost, data gets stolen, data also gets deleted and written over. So I was looking at, again, methods to manage that data and also create data quickly in case we were undertaking a project and we wanted to inform ourselves about where we stand and what we are doing. And I came across a series of these projects where data was being managed or created. Like the first idea that I saw was crowdsourcing. And this is something that probably people are using today to look at creating information maps which will inform decisions, and these decisions could be related to conservation of culture, it could be development of tourism or development of sustainable tourism with respect to culture and culture and environment both. So these are some of the projects which I found really interesting, done under this wing at MIT, which looks at MIT City Lab, which looks at, they also do live projects where they kind of engage with a city and project ideas based on their augmented reality models. And in another instance, I also found organizations like Microsoft, who every year give away a few $1,000 for research in AR and IA. They are doing IA projects where they are looking at mapping, every single bit in surrounding us. And there are projects which have been approved and completed where each tree in a forest has been documented, has got a geotag, and its progress through the years is being monitored, which means that if you are to stop an action, you would realize when something was missing. So that's something to probably learn from, or maybe think of, if we really want to do that. And I was looking at all the possibilities of storing this data and sharing this data that could be taken up. I came across certain very interesting projects like this one, which I mentioned here, which is called the Malaysia Post-Independence Architecture Atlas. And this was undertaken after they realized that their city was losing modern architecture quite fast. They were also losing it like willingly when they wanted to demolish it, or due to some reason when the decay was really beyond repair, and then something just collapsed, and people started thinking of removing it from that site. And theirs is a different approach. They used Adobe software base to put out that information, which is still not online, but it was possible to document this because it was backed by a great funding, but it also was a fairly more detailed, like including point clouds, like you can see here, and 3D modeling to understand, and everything was wrapped around, and the condition was also put in there. This is a very fancy project, and I felt that this is the level which you aspire to reach, but probably you can mitigate a little less if you had to cover objects of interest beyond the listed monuments, or beyond the protected monuments and protected buildings and landscapes. So perhaps to learn from, I also started thinking about the fallouts, and my mind went back to this conversation we had once with a British professor, and he'd said that the Nazi government actually used postcards and like tourist photographs and brochures to bomb different cities, or to decide which ones to bomb. Maybe this is an extremist idea, but I dug deeper and I found this book which is available, which is a catalog of all the information which was used to make those decisions. So not sure how much, so I'm still trying to figure out how much information, or what really would be the most appropriate kind of information put out, so that people can take the right decisions or even appreciate what they see. I also thought that maybe the other upside could be when citizens and organizations take matters into their hand, they need that kind of knowledge and information. Like this is an organization called Heritage Watchdog in Bath, who actually have a meeting board where every proposal, every meeting for a discussion of a proposal is updated, and this is what people refer to for taking action. If I'm living in the vicinity or something, and I really want to stop a proposal from getting published, from getting approved, I have the option of going there. Whereas if you look at the information board of the competent authority under ASI, which is also supposed to contain the list of all these hearings where you are allowed to participate, it is not updated from time to time, and I've also tried to follow that for a few years to understand if this is a dynamic system or a static system. I also thought of all these instances which made me realize that maybe it is wise to empower people, because finally not everybody with the right intention is at every place. Again, something that I strongly believe in, but open to discussion. We'd come across this project, which was then given to my then organization that I was working with, and this was a small rest house in Pehova under the PWD, and the PWD engineer, who was a civil engineer by profession, was given the task of cleaning the stone work here at the back, and he came across this little inscription, and he stopped all work, got in touch with his superiors, and demanded that a conservation architect or an organization be brought on board, because this was of some heritage value which he did not understand by the architectural this thing, because he saw that they were capable of doing just minor cleaning without help. But once he saw all of these and some other artwork came up, he just thought that this is beyond him, and this really needs a art conservation and a heritage conservation expert to come in and engage. And I think that's little information that he had with him. But of course, if he had more information about this building or this area, maybe he would have thought about it earlier. There are also these contemporary practices, like this is shikha on top of a monolithic, or rather dry basaltic stone construction temple in Deoghar, which is the main shrine, and there is this idea of Gadbangan, which is they tie a red colored string between Shiva and Parvati's temple shikharas, and that's meant to signify their marriage. And this happens quite a number of times during the day, and as you can see that it is leading to erosion of a very, very important surface. And again, I mean, I do not know if we could influence certain ideas by putting out information. This was a very chance finding when we were working on documenting or going back and visiting all these, again, with the organization that I was working with. We went across 7 cities in Rajasthan, and we were looking at city gates, and this is in Pokhran. We did not find the gate, and of course this is a time of no GPS, and we just had the name of the place, and we were asking people and lining up in spots. The locals told us that there would have been a gate here, and we found the remains around. And they said, yes, once it collapsed because of heavy rain, we erected this in its memory. And this was a state protected monument, and it had been investigated after many years, and nobody knew about this collapse, or it was not documented earlier. So I feel that if, again, empowering people, they could have taken a decision. They could have also understood who the right chain of command to kind of have this kind of a thing here. But of course, the intention is there to continue. Sometimes also, I feel whether it would continue, whether it would make any difference to people who take actions. On your top left is an image of the Taudu complex. It's a small, not so small, but yeah, it's a complex of very interesting 8 different monuments, and we arrived on site in 2005. This looks fairly all right. We were trying to liaise with the school next door, and the next time we went there, or rather when we started the project and we started going to the site more frequently, we realized there was a little encroachment which had come up here, which is a playground set up by the school itself. And this is in January 2015, where the seemingly harmless, one small little mazar which was there near these stones has now become quite a large establishment, like you can see. And this is after a few months of conservation that locals have come back to use it like they used to earlier. And I mean, I think all of this can be looked at when we think about empowering people. And like someone said to me, information is power. Information is the knowledge of what you're doing, and being conscious of what you're doing, and how will it go forward. And I'm still kind of meandering with all of this, but yeah, I'm trying to look at a roadmap of what I would do in the future, or what should I focus. And I'm going back again and again to modernity, the idea of modernism throughout the country, and probably the utilitarian heritage, which is not seen as something that is of immense value for preservation, conservation, continuity. And if it has to change, does it have to be informed change? And so some of the credits, and I think that I'm going to stop here because I've already overshot my time, and I'll give the podium mic back to Radha. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening.
Long and overshot, but very, very exciting work. So much and so many different sources. It's pretty fabulous. I'd like to open it up, open up the floor, and for questions to anyone in the audience. You can type in, or you may speak as you like. Tapasya, you can, if you like, stop presenting. I think your screen is still up as a... Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Can I?
Yes, please, Sachin.
Yeah, so one of the, I think, objective of your thing would be also to simplify for the audience, some of the ideas, because there are many facets to it. And I mean, for my own purpose of, discerning the whole project, I thought that you can help me, understand better that, this idea of describing the properties of a heritage building. Is it that, I mean, if we try to sum it up in a few words?
Yeah, if what I am talking about are probably just two words. I'm talking about heritage information, and there are these other things which are the questions around it, like really how much information, like you're saying. The conversation which I didn't include in this presentation, when I started talking about simplifying this idea, or rather simplifying the information that has to be put out to others. I had a couple of questions about interpretation. So whose interpretation are we going to use, or the information which is put out, does it not have to be interpretive? Because if it is not interpretive and it is just facts, then there is a danger that it might breed some amount of misunderstanding among people. So when they look at that fact, what are they going to make of it if they are casually browsing? Or if they are not seeking, say, for example, a date of something, and the date doesn't signify that it's the value. You still have to go through that whole, development of significance for a certain thing. And how do you communicate that without actually getting into the bias of interpreting, or the bias of the person who has interpreted? So how many views can you kind of put out there? So I don't know if that answers your question, but it is going to be simplified, but how to simplify it is also still a question for me, and I'm looking for answers. Like, I'm from Regal's value, idea to in contemporary times where we had a conversation about how information is sought quickly, and it has to be as quick as French fries. And in the time of fast food, I'm not sure if everybody has the patience to go through everything that you provide. So that's again something I haven't worked on beyond the initial a few conversations with people. Yeah.
I think for maybe the next thing for you would be to, see how people are generally describe heritage architecture, what kind of parameters they are you existing, in current scenario when they decide, because I'm sure there must be a lot of literature on that
Yes.
describing a heritage structure.
Tapasya. Hi,
Yes.
Bhavna.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, Bhavna.
Excellent presentation, Tapasya, and I'm just really glad that we are all in the same boat. I've been dwelling on this for a few years now, the areas that you've touched upon. Excellent. And I think as faculty, when we were saying, when you just mentioned that, the information, how do we get the information out? I think we are at a very strong position where as faculty members, we have so many students who we can actually, sort of you've actually been doing it, I've been doing it, and I think some others are also doing the same thing. We are actually inculcating this whole idea into them right now, so then in next few years we may not be fighting the same
Battles.
thing. Yes, exactly. Acha, one thing I was thinking that when you say heritage, century, then it was slightly muddly and all over. My suggestion to you, focus on one. It'll be fabulous if you just, I know in the beginning we all start like this and have a broad idea and then focus on something. Because I worked in US in 2010 on a modern structure from 1964, and I was wondering, why are we saving this? Are we it or what is it? And then once I returned back, I realized the state was a bit India. And it's our last 5 years I've been researching on modern heritage, and like WHO building that you mentioned, I actually went to the site a few days ago, before it was demolished, and I found out that they felt that the building was not earthquake proof or earthquake resistant. So okay, let's demolish it, but that's not the idea. We have enough engineers to retrofit it. So again, the idea has to go out. So of course, people like you, us, we have to keep talking about it and make people aware of this. I think and also one more
Bhavna,
thing,
I don't know, is it just me or is your voice breaking up? Is it?
Picking up a
It
bit.
is.
Yeah.
Sorry. No.
Get
Just
the
thought I'd
gist.
mention
Yeah.
it.
But I got the
But
gist.
yeah, we're getting the gist. But
Yeah.
yeah.
okay, sorry. But
Yeah.
one last point, that when we talk about modern or the 20th century heritage, SSA has been running this architects campaign of sorts, where we are exhibiting their work and trying to get into the archives, dig deeper into these buildings that these architects have created. So I think that is something that we all need to promote a little bit more, and maybe
Yeah.
have more exhibitions and get it out there. And now it's some of them are online as well, so the reach is more. And lastly, it was something about Chandigarh that I wanted to say, that about 4 or 5 years ago it was nominated as a World Heritage Site, as the first Indian building to ever be on any list of 20th century heritage. So I think it's many more, like Intact has 62 listed buildings, but they don't have any protection right now. So I think let's keep fighting for it. And thank you for this great insight.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And just to respond to one point, that these are, like I said, these are all my mind maps. I just kind of opened it out, and I'm still struggling, but trying to narrow it down to one thing. Also, I think it's being selfish and trying to keep everything right now on board, since no one's saying no. So but I am aware of this, and I think, Bhavna, what I am trying to work on is what Sachin was saying initially, is that develop something that everybody can have access to. My point is access to that heritage information and the takers for that information, more than just looking at it for conservation purpose. I'm talking about that information and empowerment of people with that information. So I'm trying to not go into that value system only. I'm trying to, what Sachin said, also take, because that's why I said crowdsourcing, because when you ask people what they feel like, where do they go if they have to go, and why will they go there, then you can think of countering, or rather, think of how proposals should be shaped, how to actually pitch for a place. and how a sustainable development will happen. So,
Right,
so
and I
my
think digital is the way forward, like you mentioned, because if you go to archives, papers are torn off. People use it one time, they take the paper with them. So going digital is the way forward. So I think that is what we need to do for
yeah, but then
everything.
the other idea that the other question I had was that how many walls do we have to preserve this paper that we already have access to? And if you ask a librarian or a archivist, their stomach churns when you actually just mention that somebody might tear a page. So are we also concerned about that object as an artifact, or is it that information which is the artifact or to be preserved? So I'm still dabbling with that question, but I will have to take everybody's opinion about it to go forward from these are the things, three theories. So still looking at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bhavna. A few questions have come on the chat. Piyush says, very insightful presentation. And Marina has a question. Is heritage conservation a cultural value that can be inculcated?
Marina, I think that is a valid question. As an academic, yes, in the nice world inside our heads, of course, it's a value which can be inculcated. But how is the question? When we look at this exercise of stakeholder interaction, or even present an idea to a community, which is an idea within their community, there's going to be a danger of an outsider's opinion, a sanitized scientific opinion sometimes. But yes, if you look at what certain organizations and individuals are doing, is engaging with the grassroots stakeholders. This idea of building, own a building or own a heritage is something which is now a textbook model, and maybe valuing that is the first step to taking steps for its conservation or continuity. So like maybe certain examples like obliterated. There are certain times when we have found that no action has been a blessing for a place. But with this, my question, the question which came to my mind, that if you put out information out there, does it make it so important that people start actually thinking of ways in which they can take advantage of that heritage also? So the idea of not a particular heritage, but the idea of actually how to value and then preserve that value, maybe that is something we need to build upon, and it should become a part of a curriculum, and that's the best way to move forward than other things, and other mediums is what I feel. That's in my opinion, but yes, I'm open to other ideas. Thank you.
Professor Menon or the Dean of SSD also had, please.
Actually, I have a question which is connected to what Marina has also asked earlier. And I look at it from a designer's perspective and from a, you can say, cultural perspective as well. And I've been interested in understanding the role of living history, the role of continuity in taking something forward in the conservation process. So whether we are doing adaptive reuse or whether we are doing purely a conservation sort of a project, how can we make it possible to get the history to continue through that the process and afterwards? So in certain cases, when we look at heritage conservation, there is already a community or a live people who are in that context, and they are continuing there, and they can be onboarded onto that. But in certain cases, there may be absolutely, you can say, disused or unused buildings or situations or contexts. And this is my own research interest area, which is creating continuity in the history and finding out the way to bring that out in the conservation process as well. So this is an aspect which I haven't really seen happening everywhere, other than a few examples maybe where it has been properly kind of integrated into the process. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, I'm first of all, too small a fish to make noise in this pond at the moment. But my experience with working with live or rather living heritage, continued heritage projects is that it is again a dialogue, and it's a constantly evolving dialogue as well. When we visit a site or we arrive at a place which has already been taken care of for such a long time, like I said earlier, it's an intention. The intention is correct. The intention is right. Also, we have other viewpoints, like how David Harvey's contested cities idea is that the city will always be in flux. We cannot freeze it. We cannot think of it like a static being put inside a box. And we need to be adapting constantly our ideas to that change, or rather, we should. But I feel in this case, my idea is to influence that change. So I'm not for, or I do not strongly believe that we will ever be able to stop that change or alter that change. But can we inform it? Is what my point is, and I stand with that for the last 7-8 years. That I think it is the lack of knowledge about something which can lead to an in the intellectual word an ignorant action, but it is an action. It will happen no matter what we think to stop it. It will happen, but if it is an informed action, then there is some hope that the person who is taking, or rather interpreting that information for action, is taking a conscious decision, and is the ownership then again lies on the person who is taking that action. It's not with the fact that there is a lack of information, and hence I took any action that I deemed fit at that point of time. So that's what my view right now is, and I'm of course open to other ideas.
Yeah. So in my case, I'm interested in the idea of creating artifacts which can take this thing forward. So that is my research interest area. So that's why I was asking.
Okay. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind for our future conversations.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Menon. See, it might be Marina. You're welcome. Any other questions? We have a lot of heritage history people in our faculty group. This is Tapasya's intended PhD or somewhere in this area. So any direction for her? Any
I am not to it yet.
Yeah, but
Can I come in? I
Yes.
feel it my duty to come in rather than.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel, you presented a lot of information and a lot of threads. So you came with a cart full of vegetables, and it's not clear ki banana kya hai. So, and each vegetable has a potential. So, there's bangan, there's Loki, there's bindi, there's, and each of those can become a very nourishing, enriching meal. But, and I think you are also aware of this. Therefore, my hesitancy in, arriving at a clear question is because there are many threads. Each sentence has lots of threads. Like demolition, demolition is also, nature of demolition, how it's demolished. You decide and then find the cause, what is the linear demolition, what is the other in terms of society, what's happening. And also the vocabulary you use for old buildings is like an ailing patient. Should that patient be put on a ventilator, or should the plug be pulled out because it's not worth saving? So is it right to use vocabulary? I mean, of course, in architecture one does use, the metaphor of a human body, and also the city. Also one uses the metaphor of a human body. But to heritage, where heritage is perpetually going to be a patient. That's what I meant. That it's going to perpetually have medical bills. And is that fair to assume that it's perpetually ailing, which may not be the case? So to question that, to question the ethical dilemma of saving, the idea of saving, and also, the saviors, therefore, are, people who are experts, people who are empowered with that idea that I can save you, so who is the savior? It's another, not very different from the colonizing agenda of the savior and the expert, is a continuation, better put, more euphemism. But it is, I don't see it very different from the colonizing agenda of saying, you're ailing, I'm going to save you because I know the information. Now that is the danger of you getting the data, that you're actually feeding the savior. You're not feeding the less empowered. Really, you're just making them stronger and more powerful. And now that is the dilemma I was talking about. And whether the archive is a cold storage, who is it archiving for, what is the accessibility issue you've already raised. But if you put stuff in the fridge, of course accessibility is an issue, but it also kind of it works as a balm on your conscience that we've done something about it and let's now move on. That's what has been the part in the West, how they've fossilized, museumized, archived, bung it in the cold storage and forget about it, and then build a gherkin. So there is very little continuity, therefore, in this kind of. So that would be another struggle to. And of course, your representation of buildings in terms of drawings, in terms of data, in terms of, and you could again, bring back the analogy of the human being, that we are a hard disk of data. Fingerprints, the accounts, the numbers, the ID card, so once you, and once you datafy a human being, there are things you've already said are not important. Because firstly, the technology doesn't allow you, and then because culturally it's too complex. So those are the decisions, and maybe I think it might be of some use to look at, Shonalika Cole has worked very succinctly, very interestingly. She has a very clear mind, which I really admire. And she's a young art historian who works on historiography, who works on the methods we use to look at history, look at our past. And she gives examples of, not all of us have to be same. Puranas were a way of recording our history. Now, the way we looked at history culturally was always for a lesson. It was instructional history. It was not objectively recording, archiving. There cannot be an objective recording, archiving history. And your egalitarian dream, I'm afraid, is also, fraught with difficulties of which camp you're in, who you're empowering, what is the language you're using. I mean, 70% of our population does not have access to online education. So whose camp are you in? You've already, so I think this is a very, very complex, area, field, and as Bhavna, Sachin, and Sasi, Marina as well. I think we need to kind of pool in our resources, maybe, or work on, or actually just work on Bengal and see if you want to make Bengal. Or I'm being light-hearted here. But that is the difficulty. You can't do everything.
If I may point out, my bangan, the bangan in the dish is actually dynamic information. That is the reason I am mentioning the projects that really moved me, or I think are doing some groundbreaking work, is keeping it dynamic, not the ones where you can like the model is frozen in time and you put a wrapper around it or you box it and you keep it away. So one of the graphics I developed was that, boxing up a building and like you're saying, people looking from outside and the people who have stories. And then again, that is an interpretation, but it is an intangible heritage which is related to a place and requires or demands recording and demands interpretation. And maybe sometimes interpretation may become dangerous in that case because it's a double interpretation. It's the first hand account and then you're doing not a second, but you skip and do a third hand account. So I'm still struggling to find an answer to that question. And every time I have a dialogue with someone about a bias or about the idea being biased in the first place, I think this is the most important issue that I'm facing. I mean, what form of the information and really who is it for? Because, it seems very selfish to, like you said, obliterate or narrow it down to one community of people. And if you're really talking about, I started off by calling this subject access to information, heritage information. Then, if I'm not going to support the word access, then it wouldn't be justified. And the whole idea of going through the thinking, going through all these motions for years is not going to be justified for myself in the first place. So I'm still playing it cool because no one's saying no and no one's telling me not to do this. So the moment there is someone telling me not to do something, I will start dropping things. But right now, I'm looking for the potato to go with my bangan. And those are the two things even on top of my list. Archiving and the dynamics of a building. That's what I said, that they constantly going to be changed. And the other is the action appropriation. So if that information, like I said, there are going to be fallouts, and I gave an extreme fallout, but of course the other fallout is misinterpretation and taking an action on that misinterpreted information. So yes, those ranges are clear to me, but I do not know where it is going to go. So I think I'm going to need 5 more years to come to some sort of conclusive remark there. Thank you for your observations.
Yeah, thank you, Vibhuti. A lot of, I think Parul has also indicated that there are multiple discussions that are folded into the presentation. I'm hoping that she asks a question. I don't know if she's still here. I know a lot of us have class that starts at 10. Parul is still here. Okay. I don't know if she wants to ask, but no, not to put her on the spot, but would you?
Me?
Thanks. Yeah.
Sure. No. So no, there's no question. I think suggestions. That will be another 2-hour discussion with Tapasya as a verse. So yes, I think I found what Professor Menon's concern was with respect to continuing history as an interesting perspective, and would certainly lots of my work also intersects with this idea of history, heritage, memory, and all of that. So I mean, whatever little knowledge I have gained through this journey that I've had, it would be lovely to take that forward. And for Tapasya, of course, she's always been super ambitious and wanting to do everything as an individual, and that obviously reflects in her presentation. So I think it's about letting go a little bit, Tapasya. So let's work on that. So that's about it for now. Thanks.
The number of people I had listed as conversation credits, I think I forgot your name, Parul, but yes, I will need help in eliminating ideas or falling less in love with ideas, I guess.
Yes.
I'm getting carried away because, of course, I've been thinking about it for too long, nothing else. I mean, I don't have biases, and every time I read something new and a layer is added by a conversation, even after the last few conversations with my colleagues and participants in that workshop was that, it was too many ideas. I tried boiling them down, but still too many. So now
Yes, Tapasya. So I think that'll be an interesting journey to begin to let go and yeah, get a clear focus. And of course, it is difficult for has been difficult for all of us who've been in the field for a while, and because there's so much that comes with what we have been working on, so much that comes with what we have explored, read, experienced. So obviously, I mean, it is a very tricky and it's a very challenging process, but I guess, I mean, you know, we'll get there. Thanks, and all the best. Yeah.
I'm
And
unlearning
I would just add, Tapasya, please do have biases. That's what makes you human. We just need to be aware of those biases. That was the point of the bias.
Mrinali's,
Mrinali's, yeah, and we just need to be aware so that we're not misled, and we don't in any way harm another person or something without, you know, in our misjudgment. That's what, of course you have to have bias. You can't be objective. You're not a robot. Even robots have biases. Even God has bias. So
Absolutely.
all of that, yeah.
my last conversation was when I was presenting this to Professor Scriver was that I am unlearning to be a conservation architect. I need to not think like one, and only then can I do justice to this topic or subject. Because if I keep thinking like, oh my, this is precious, this is value, and this is this and that, I will not be able to even make it simple, like Sachin mentioned, make it simple enough for people to understand the essence of that structure or place. And that I think is what is the communication that I would intend to take forward. But thank you very much for your encouragement and your ideas. I will work on them, and I will work on reducing the cart load.
Thela. But yeah, thanks a lot, Tapasya, and you know, fabulous presentation. And we look forward to having our great audience and topics. I think you've really highlighted a lot for people who are in this field, and also just given so many archival references, etc. So for proposition, again, I'd like to thank my fabulous team, Sobhya, Sachin, you know, not too much behind the scenes, but they really keep things going so smoothly at the, you know, at the back end, for lack of a better term, and Srijani, who does the live streaming meticulously every week. So thanks a lot to all of them, and see you next week. I think we have Parshati next week with her proposition. So not next week. I think I make this mistake every week. Next 2 weeks, in 2 weeks from now. All right. Bye, Tapasya. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining in.
Thank you everyone for sparing time. Thank you.